Hey, friends. A lot of folks have asked me over the years, Jason, how did you start writing your book? What were the parts to the process that helped you formulate your ideas? Where did you put those ideas? And then how did you take those ideas and get them out on paper and then turn them into some sense of a structure? And what I am going to share with you is an interview that I enjoyed very much with Bridget Cook-Burch, who is the individual who she's just such a gifted writer and creator and consultant. And she was my consultant and guide. I'll just say she was my guide as we walked through the process of writing Unhooked. And Unhooked has achieved way more than I ever imagined possible. It has reached other countries, it's reached family members right here in my home state and everywhere in between. And it just continues to have a life of its own. It's almost like when someone says, "Oh, I read your book and it has helped me." It's like they're talking about a thing that has a living, breathing life. And of course, I'm always grateful for the compliments, but it has been a long time since I have felt like I can take credit for that book. But the process of writing it, I have to give credit to the spirit that's in the book, the frameworks and the research done by many others that I was able to compile and bring to light through a lot of hours of getting help, and Bridget was a huge part of that process. And so I interviewed Bridget. It was an interview done a while ago, but I want to bring it to the forefront so that you can experience her wisdom and just know that she offers a lot of help and packages to those that want to start writing their books. So check out her website. We'll drop it in the show notes, but enjoy this interview. I'm excited for you, and just let me know if you ever want to write a book, because I'm going to be creating a course that will help facilitate the process and prepare you for Bridget's services, because I really want to refer people to her because she is just such an amazing, gifted creator and person. So thank you and enjoy. Have you ever wanted to write a book? For those of you that ask me, "Hey, Jason, what was it like writing a book? I'm thinking I want to write one. I have a story to tell, or I have a friend that really needs to get their story out there." I have never had an opportunity like I do today to sit down with my mentor, my coaching guru, the book whisperer, as she has been called, who helped me not just write and get Unhooked published, but the beautiful process and adventure and journey that writing a book deserves. And I know there are a lot of different motives and reasons why people write a book, and I honor and value all of them. I think along the way, I probably had periods where I experienced those motives at different times. You know, I wanted it for professional reasons. I wanted it for credibility reasons. I wanted it for reasons so that I could just help somebody who was asking me questions. It was like, "Hey, just read this and then ask me." I wanted it to change lives. I wanted it to open up doors where I could meet incredible individuals. And so I think the purity of writing a book is in the commitment to see it through and to go through all of the phases of what it takes to not just bring a story to life and to package it in a way that is something you could be proud of, but also learning a new industry and learning the business side of how to prepare a product for a go-to-market stage, how to make those decisions of, do I self-publish or do I, pursue a proposal and get an agent and see if we can get into with a publishing house, which I had experiences on both sides of that. And I'm not sure if we will get to all of it today, but maybe this deserves more than one interview with my dear, wonderful sister and mentor, Bridget. And Bridget Cook-Burch is the one woman that I recommend anytime someone is serious about writing a book, anytime someone is invested in bringing their story to life, because Bridget is packed with opportunities and is doing so many things globally and locally. I think it's worth reading her official bio, and this is probably over the top for her, and the informality of this particular video or interview, but I think she deserves this justice. So as it's been mentioned, she is the book whisperer. She's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, mentor, trainer, mama bear, humanitarian. As I mentioned, she's doing a lot of different things out there, and she's a professional speaker. And, she does have riveting stories of transformation. Her work and her books have been showcased on Oprah, Dateline, CNN, GMA, and the History Channel, even NPR, and in People magazine and People, among many others. It's cool because she's the CEO and founder of yourinspiredstory.com. And I don't know how you got that domain, but how cool is that? She's also it is cool. It is cool. She's also the co-founder and former executive director of Sheroes United, a nonprofit organization that helps women and girls rise from trauma. As a leader, storyteller, trainer, and humanitarian, her greatest passion is helping others to discover the importance of their own story and to become leaders in their own communities and worldwide. I met Bridget through a mutual friend and the author, and this is Rebecca Musser. Her story, The Witness Wore Red, was co-written with Bridget. And that is how Bridget and I met at an event. Bridget, thank you for taking time. This is super informal. I just appreciate you carving out this time more than anything, just to reconnect with you after a few years. We used to meet like a couple times a week in the mornings, and we would wake up at the crack of dawn and we would go at it.
And go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So why, I guess, what would you say to someone who's like, how do I write a book? Because that's the question I get asked all the time. Mm-hmm. How do I write my story?
Well, that is a big topic that obviously I could cover over days and days, but to get right down to it is, I think, especially for your audience, people who have lived through the breath of hell, but have worked on overcoming and are now victors of their own stories, and humble victors, which is what we want, humble heroes, which is a beautiful thing. It is to recognize that in the darkness often lies the seeds of your greatest glory. Really good storytelling, we get vulnerable. We don't downplay the hard stuff. We allow the lessons of life to be our greatest teachers. And that's where we get our elixir of life. It's that which we have to share, that we have lived through this beautiful, tragic, hard, and exquisite lived experience that we now can share with other people. And whether fiction or nonfiction, because a lot of fictional authors have taken what they have experienced and they have poured it into their characters and created something extraordinary. So either way, the depth of storytelling, really good storytelling, comes down to the rawness and the realness, and also the glory and power of the human soul. So
I love it.
Yeah, getting in touch with that and not being afraid of it. That's number one. That really is number one. And number two is to sit down and write.
Yes. So where do you start? Where do you start? I mean, I could tell my story about this, but really I think it's so cool because you work with so many different people that there are different stages of embracing that courage and willingness to sit down and write. But okay, so I'm sitting down at my desk. I got my piece of paper out and a pen, new clean journal. What the heck do I start with? Like, how do you advise?
Yeah.
And recommend where someone starts, or is there a book that you would recommend someone reads or anything like that?
Well, I will share this with you. Writing is very healing. And so I don't discount any writing. It's never wasted. It's always utilized somewhere, either to assist you to heal or to help you know what to say to a friend, or it belongs in your book, or it's going to be in a speech. So sitting down and writing is a really great thing. A lot of people get stuck though, because they've written these pieces at different stages and times, and maybe even different journals or, on the computer. And they're like, I have some really great pieces, but I don't know how to put it all together. And so a lot of it will be determined by, for nonfiction, for your own story, is a memoir your best bet, or would it be best to have a self-help book, or to do a hybrid like what you did, where you shared your story and then you shared this unearthing of incredible wisdom that came on the other side, of your dark night, and where you rose and what you were able to do with it. And then to be so vulnerable as to share your pieces of story. So there's a couple people who've done that really well, including you. And Matthew McConaughey just came out with a book called Green Lights. And so he's an exquisite writer, and he essentially did a memoir, and you understand where he came from and why he's had the value system that he's had. Whether you agree with it or not, you understand him. And then when he shares, green lights, what opportunities have meant in his mind, and then how to get there and how to take a hold of it like a wild horse, then you have this understanding of, so you get the teaching and the wisdom along with the story. So it's usually memoir or self-help or some sort of hybrid, as long as it's done well.
How do you choose?
It depends on what you're going to do with the book, what you want the book to leverage, what doors you want to have open. And so for some, they just want to heal from their story. Then that would be memoir in nature. There's some who are natural teachers. And so they're storytellers, but they all want it to be relevant to just lessons, and lessons that can go out in a professional sense or a therapeutic sense, something to that degree. Then theirs is strictly self-help. They're like, I've done all these things and helped all these people. I want these lessons in the book. So that's the best way. And also just take a look, like give yourself this discovery and adventure to explore books in the genre that you think you might want to enjoy. And then are you enjoying reading them? Are you enjoying picking them up and picking them apart and seeing what works and what doesn't work? Because you and I have talked, and there is a journey to writing, and you want to be able to enjoy it. The other thing that no matter what kind of book you're writing, I highly suggest you do a timeline. This is where people go from being writers to being authors, because a timeline helps you see patterns in your own life that you likely did not give yourself credit for before. I've worked with a woman that's in her 70s, an exquisitely amazing creature. And when you look at her, you would have no idea all the hell and high water that she's been through. And she's such an extraordinary creature on the other side. Well, she was writing an autobiography for her family to start with. And she would just write down stories as they came to her. So she had these great stories. But when I asked her to do a timeline, and this is the clincher, I asked her to do a timeline so she could see really what came before and what came after. And she called me up in tears and she said, I like me better now. I understand me better now. Because she was able to see all the places where she'd made decisions, oftentimes in reaction to other individuals in her life or situations and circumstances where she did the best she could with what she knew. But when they're separate experiences, there's not that thread of meaning. When you do a timeline and you see how you lived, why you took the actions that you did, how different relationships had an effect on you and how you had an effect on others. Ooh, all of a sudden you go from that writing status to, I recognize that there is something very powerful here for me to share. And you see yourself in such a different light. It's beautiful.
Oh, it brings to mind this pivot in the process for me as I'm listening to you, where I knew that I needed and wanted to write a book. And that was a personal experience that I had while I was practicing Step 11, which is about meditation. That's in the 12 steps of recovery. And I felt this strong impression that I needed to write a book. Now, at first it was like, okay, I'm just going to write a memoir, like my story. I'm just going to write my story. So I started to think about like, what would I write? But at some point shifted to writing for the readers rather than writing for the writer. And that shift didn't happen early. It happened at some point along the line. And our friend Kevin Hall taught me that I think was taught to him by Stephen R. Covey, who wrote 7 Habits, which was right for the readers, not for the writer. And
yeah,
our friend who wrote Left to Tell, Immaculate. I won't even try her last name because I will butcher it. What's her last name?
I had to memorize that. Ilabagiza.
Immaculate Ilabagiza wrote Left to Tell, and it's a bestseller. She recommended at that same event where we met in Coronado Island, which sounds like I lived this high life, but I want you to know I was there on 100% scholarship. People were letting me sleep on their couch in the hotel room. I think I was a year sober or 2 years sober, something like that. And anyway, the book she recommended that I read was Millionaire Messenger by Brendan Burchard. And the Millionaire Messenger gist is that if you want to build a business of writing as an author and as a speaker, this is how. But what the nugget that I took from that book, the reason why I needed to read that book was there was some questions in there that says, how do you choose what to write? And how do you choose who to write it to? Mm-hmm. And one of the questions in there was, how you will know is who asks you for advice and what advice are they asking for that's consistent. And I had just got off the phone with one of my sister-in-laws asking about one of her loved ones that is struggling with alcoholism. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I take multiple calls a day from family members that are asking, how do I help my addicted loved one? How do I help him? How do I help her? What do I do? And that was a huge shift for me to recognize that I had something to offer to the world. Yes. But if you try to make it important to everyone, you end up not making it important to anyone. And
yeah, it becomes
you help me
muddy. Yeah.
Yep. And you helped me identify that avatar when we started working together. Talk to us a little bit about selecting an avatar and sort of that process and where that goes when in the identifying the story and what's important and what's not important.
Right. We spend some considerable time on this in my inspired writers retreats, because sometimes I have people who've been writing for 10 or 20 years and have not asked themselves, who is this really for? And we all want our books to be bought by everyone, right? We want to all become bestsellers. We would love to hit New York Times. We'd love to hit Wall Street Journal, all these other lists. And yet, what you just said, if you're trying to write to everyone, your message gets so muddy. But when you have the desire to serve someone, and so I love it that you just got off the phone with someone who was asking you this question and you thought, look at all these people that ask me this over and over and over again. I have something to share. And so I suggest that you pick one person that you can have an intimate conversation with, that they have a deep need and you know what keeps them up at night. You recognize you often have lived that pain, and that you have something that within just a few moments, you two can be having this really deep, intimate conversation where two things are important that happen. One is that you're willing to share on a gut level the wisdom And from that vulnerable space, that you also don't have to vindicate or validate yourself, because that will come in the storytelling anyway, because you're a victor over your circumstances. And so there will be threads of that. But that way, you're not writing the book out of vengeance. You're not writing it for alternate reasons. You're writing to serve. I'll share with you a powerful story, Jason. I had a woman who was the daughter of a serial killer. Her name is Melissa Moore. She's an extraordinary leader in LA and Hollywood, having overcome being the happy-faced serial killer's daughter. And, we were talking about who is this book meant to serve? And in her journey, as she was growing older, she discovered that there was a young girl who was going through similar things that Melissa had gone through. She was the daughter of the Spokane killer. And the media was just like shredding this family apart. And so were the victims' families, because people have a misconception that if there's a serial killer in the family, you somehow must have read their mind, understood their motives, and it's just not true. But she knew how this young girl would be feeling, and she wanted so badly to reach out to her, and knew that the media would rip her apart. And she was being very protective at the time of her own family. So she didn't reach out to her, but she held her always right here in her heart. And she said, this is who I want to write the book to. And so that is that deep level of service of someone else who is in incredible pain, but has the ability to rise beyond it, that we had the desire to serve. And why I'm sharing this with you is because that book was raw and real and vulnerable. And there's a reason it was on Oprah, and she was asked to come back when Oprah and Dr. Shell came back together for the first time in like over 7 years. There's a reason that this is still used in therapeutic circles around the world. And she gets all these beautiful emails from people with their own skeletons in their closet. Here's another cool thing, that one avatar, the power of the one. Melissa is now a producer of several shows, and she produced a show called Monster in My Family. And what she did was she brought the families of serial killers together with the families of the victims for the very first time. Melissa is known for bringing compassion to true crime in Hollywood, first time ever. And it was so powerful. I mean, think of the Boston bombers family and the victims' families, right? Just the power of this. Well, one of the first people on her show was that young woman that, now a little bit older, but that she wrote the book for. And so Melissa's being filmed and she's all professional, and this woman, and they're walking somewhere, and she said, I wrote that book for you, don't you? And the woman's like, oh yeah, that was very nice. Thank you. I'm sobbing because I saw, Jason, the full circle of the power of writing to that one person, and that the ripples continue. We've had a woman in her 70s that wrote to Melissa, and she said, I had a grandmother who was a serial killer. And she said, I thought I would be chained to the secret for the whole rest of my life until I read your story. She was 72. That was not her avatar, but that's the power of being able to reach this, massive audience when you write to the one.
When you think about that person, what do you write? And you have a process that really helped me when I had my person, and actually I don't think I've ever told her that I wrote the book to her, because it was for one of my clients and one of my friends' mothers. Well, out of HIPAA and anonymity, I'll keep her name quiet, but she is such a beautiful woman. But I was like, okay, where do I start? Do I just start giving her a bunch of advice? I also feel like I need to share part of my story, but how does that help her? And I began to think through all of this stuff. And I had done some interviews, for some papers in school. I actually was the genesis. I even pulled this out for this. The genesis of Unhooked was a paper that I wrote in graduate school called 5 Keys to Helping an Addict. And here's all the the research and articles that I was pulling nuggets from to write this paper for school. So I had done some exploring, like you said, like
yeah, you had that whole file
research
already.
the topic. Yeah, research the topic. But what's the process that you walked me through along the hero's journey? And you don't have to, I know you have a full workshop and events about this because it's so robust, and the scale and scope of it and the depth and breadth is beyond what we can cover here. But maybe you can at least illuminate what that kind of looks like.
Yeah. Well, for you in particular, I remember, you talking about these 5 keys. I remember also you telling me how the addicted brain operates so differently, and that people don't often understand that, and that the addict is in there still, but their brain is operating differently. And you kept having these stories of being able to share this. And Jason, you got to go more into story, because just recognizing the pain, I remember, again, a HIPAA thing, but I remember you telling one of my clients who had a brother who was in the throes of horrific addiction, and she kept trying to save him. And you said, who are you to deny him his pain? Because there was a need for him to feel his rock bottom, to not be supported in certain places. And your parents' story, and other members of your family, but what you had been through, you wanted so badly for the family members to be able to see what happens when there's a cushion and a cushion and a cushion, and what that deep need is for, to be able to hit that. But then also your passion behind the motivational interviewing and these other pieces of great wisdom that you had to share. So I think at that point we realized, if they're able to see their loved one through your story, then it does 2 things. Number one is it takes the judgment out of it, because oftentimes we judge our loved ones. Well, why can't they just? Why can't they just? And I remember you saying that people they're so frustrated. Why can't they just get this? And then the second thing was to give themselves permission to get off the beach. I remember that being such a huge thing for you and your story and your lessons. And so we recognized that you speaking to the avatar and being raw and real and vulnerable in your story of, how you go from being this, young, vibrant, brilliant young man. And you would never say brilliant, but I will. Brilliant young man, and, on the path to happiness and success, and surrounded by success, all, your siblings and your parents, and, all the things that most people strive for was right there at your fingertips. But there was this addiction that had started for you early, when you had injuries from your soccer and other things, and what it had done to your brain. And so here you are, relatively innocent and very, very successful in your own right, still having a core of am I enough, or I don't think I'm enough, which almost every human faces, I would say every human at the core, and recognizing I got to tell it from this, how I got in and how I didn't let myself get out until, so that loved ones could really see inside your story. And then when you had all of this plethora of wisdom that you could tie back to your story, then suddenly things that normally wouldn't make sense to an individual made so much sense, because they understood your story. They understood their loved ones inside of your story. And then they were at a place where they could collect that wisdom and start to utilize it. Because if you only shared the wisdom, I think you were seeing it would not be remembered, but your story would, and then the lessons that came with it could be interwoven. And that's how humans learn best, is through story. We don't remember statistics, but we do remember story. And you have such an extraordinary story that people remember. And now you're getting all of these, daily emails, daily text messages about how your book is really supporting and affecting this transformational change throughout the industry at a time when we need it most. The epidemic of drug abuse and addiction is much higher and has more lingering effects and destroys more lives than the pandemic. And I'm just so grateful that you decided to be that vulnerable. But for you, it was recognizing how your story had to be the catalyst for change for others. And, some people might feel like they don't have that severe of a story or that extreme of a story. But the thing for all of us to remember is that we all go on this hero's journey, and the details may look different, but the emotions are the same. The having to go into the dark cave and to meet the dragon, and the dragon has you in its teeth, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm the dragon. And then you make the decision to rise up and rise out. And we all go through that. So it doesn't matter the details. What matters and what keeps it relevant to the reader is you, the person that they fell in love with in the beginning, and you share with them your vulnerable experiences and the skill sets and the new learned passion and what you bring to the table when you come back out into the ordinary world with this to share.
You once shared with me a quote that describes writing a book and the journey so beautifully. Do you mind sharing that with everybody?
I don't mind sharing that with everybody because it is, I think it's vitally important, because a lot of times people think it's easy to write a book and they're like, oh yeah, and I'll have this knocked out in a month. And you can. Jason and I decided early on that we were not going to have an expensive business card, right, Jason? It was going to be more than a credibility builder because he wanted to save lives. But then parts of it were excruciating along the way. So Winston Churchill, he writes about how writing a book is an adventure. To begin with, he says it's a toy, then an amusement, then it becomes a mistress, then it becomes a master, and then it becomes a tyrant. And in the last stage, just as you are about to be reconciled to your servitude, you kill the monster and fling him to the public.
That is so accurate. Oh man, is that accurate? Mm-hmm. It feels like one of my cousins wrote a book, and she said, Jason, if you're going to write a book, it's like labor. It's painful, but it's a labor of love, and you just grow to love it. And I think you spoke to a couple of things that I want to bring up. And the first is the timeline expectations of what it takes to write a book, especially if you're writing it to leave a legacy. If you're writing a book to enhance and progress your career, that might be a little more quick and dirty, and you just do the best that you can within that timeline that you have set forth for those reasons. And mine took longer than I would have liked throughout the period, but I am so grateful that I paused at times and recognized that I was actually in one of the chapters, and I was about to have some experiences that brought a lot of layers and depth and insight to the manuscript. And so had I pumped out the book when I originally wanted to, which was, I just kept saying, oh, next year I'm going to publish it. It was on my vision board every single New Year's. Like, this is the year. I'm going to finish my book, publish it, and be done. But it was on my vision board and my New Year's resolutions for 10 years. And I'm not saying, hey, you guys, like, start now, because 10 years from now you'll have it. It was just, I think mine was really interesting because I started it when I was really at an emotionally immature space, like just out of, addiction. And, I was living in sober living at the time when I decided I was going to write a book, and I was applying to school. And so it's not like I was ready to roll. I had a lot to learn, and the process of writing it through that was in seasons. So it wasn't necessarily like I wrote the whole time. Like I would write a little bit and then I would live.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, something would happen that would inspire me to get back to writing. And of course I was journaling but it wasn't for a book. It wasn't for that. Here's the thing is you referenced a resource that I want to recommend everybody watch, which is the documentary Finding Joe, which is the hero's journey in depth about one of the thought leaders, Joseph Campbell. And it really brings to life this hero's journey and the relationship with the dragon, and the dragon is us and our fear. So it's called Finding Joe. Not super stoked about the title of it, but I do recommend that. It's an hour and a half and it's one of the best documentaries yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. Second is I read the book Aspire, Discovering Your Purpose Through the Power of Words by Kevin Hall, which is who introduced me and Bridget. What I loved about his work is that it was in the self-help genre, but it was layered. So you would read a chapter, then there was his insights and takeaways in like a journal form. And then there was a sub-story, which were Afternoons with Arthur, which was his mentor teaching him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that layer was really fascinating to me, but I didn't set out to write a book that was layered. I set out to, okay, let's just get the baseline of the hero's journey well done. And we went segment by segment, which Bridget coached me through. Okay, I want you to write a segment about the initiation. Like, let's talk about the initiation. And then we would go and we talked about like, what was the boon at the time you were going to give up, and all of these stages, which really helped me formulate my story in context of the hero's journey, which is really, really helpful. But the layers of Unhooked came not writing, but when I like on the treadmill in the mornings, I would just put on music that would help me think. And I would literally just think about the book and the stories and how does it work. And then I got the idea of incorporating the stages of change and motivational interviewing. One was on a run. I still remember exactly where I was. I was just running and it just hit me like a ton of bricks as I was thinking about the book. And the other came after I took a workshop, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this brings so much more depth to the message that I'm already writing. And so the layers came as I learned. And, you know, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I was really hungry. I was seeking, but the layers took time to develop and to sequence it and to bring it about. But here's the ultimate message. And maybe this is like the capstone of it all, is that in working with Bridget, we started every one of our sessions with a prayer. And you all know that, and if you have read Unhooked, you all know that the biggest shift that I had to do with some divine intervention throughout, but the big ones were when my son Nathan was born, my experience of feeling God's unconditional love for me like I felt for him. And just trusting that he would guide me along. And so, although I didn't know what the end result of Unhooked was going to be, neither did I know that I was going to be in the addiction treatment industry as and own one and then own two and live in Idaho. None of that was even on the radar when I began this. But I love this quote by Richard G. Scott, one of my all-time favorite people. He says, as you walk to the boundary of your understanding into the twilight of uncertainty, exercising faith, you will be led to find solutions you would not obtain otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And we always walked to the end of the boundary of my understanding together. And then it was like unfolded.
Well, and what was beautiful too, Jason, is you were open to that. You know, you were open to what I call the deepening, because we set out and we have an idea of what our story ought to look like. But if we allow the deepening, then suddenly our lessons become more clear to us, but also of more service to other people because of the way that we learn that we can put it together. So you were open to those layers, and you were writing while you were living. You were writing while you were serving. So I love that you had these ahas, in the middle of teaching and then on your treadmill. People often will get these ahas in the shower or on a hike. Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art, and he's done blockbuster things, and then he's had failures too. And he's very transparent about that in that book. But he'll write for a time, and then he goes for a hike every day. He walks away because he knows that there is the work at the computer, and then there is the deepening, the problem solving, the clarity that comes when you're away, when you're living. And so I always say you got to live juicy to write juicy, and to keep on doing that, but I love the depth that you allowed to come, and the fact that, not all of my clients would like to say a prayer in the beginning. And that is something that you requested. Whenever I have a client that requests that, because I will say one before I jump on with them. But whenever we do that together, and that's their choice, the deepening happens, the clarity comes. It's just lovely to see when spirit is trusted and then is allowed to be a co-creator in the process. And then what I've loved seeing is the ripples that you've had after the book was done too. But you affected my life while we were writing. You were a great teacher in the throes of it. It was beautiful.
Bridget, you have your own recovery story that is incredibly beautiful. And I know that this project particularly had meaning for you. And I think that the combination of your passion and gifts and my passion and willingness to be led by you and take your suggestions and inviting the spirit into the process, the spirit of recovery kept opening. It just would shine. The sunlight of the spirit was illuminating the direction along the way. The result of that isn't just a finished manuscript. And I think this is the power of what you just said. The spirit is in the book, meaning as the book has taken on its own life, it almost feels like it's its own thing now. And when I hear people have read it, and they live far away, I'm like, how the heck did they find out about Unhooked? Or recently I heard someone dear to me was at a funeral service. And when the mother got up to honor and offer the eulogy and honor her son who had overdosed, and I had never met this woman, and she doesn't know me except for she talked about that she was so blessed and grateful that she had read a book about addiction that gave her understanding. And she mentioned the book, and she mentioned my name, and the person in the audience heard her say, had I not read this book before my son's overdose, I would be so devastated. But I now understand so much more about what my son lived. And I just am at so much more peace. And Brian is his name. Brian's dad got up and shared that he was given the book, and he finished it. I think it was 2 days before they found out that their son overdosed. And they were telling the whole audience in the service how much they learned from this book. Now, Jason Coombs, me, cannot do that work. Like that is not, and it's not a Bridget Cook-Burch thing. That is the coming together of the ultimate. I think that's the ultimate blessing of all of those hours and all those years that I tried to pull this together. And then the last year or two working with you before it was published. I'm so grateful to just be a witness to what it's doing now on its own. And I think that's the real message, is that when a book doesn't just collect dust in someone's garage. And I have friends that said, I got a pallet of my books and they're just collecting dust. I can't give them away.
Right.
Oh man, I don't want to do that. So I think the difference between that and the experiences that I'm hearing is that the spirit is in the book, because I don't think it's not about me, and it's not about you, and it's not about my story. It's about all of the profound unlocking personal revelation and understanding it gives the reader as they go through.
But I would like to say it is about you. It is relevant to you because you allowed yourself not only to be the vessel, but to write about the unlocking. It sometimes because I appreciate your humbleness, but I also just would love to remind your listeners and audience to recognize that you still have to be the core of the story. We have to have the main character. We have to have the hero. And when you invite spirit in, then it illuminates this healing of forward and back. It illuminates the paths to a greater degree. It helps you to come to fruition in your recognition of yourself and also in your service to others. But you got to be a willing vessel. You got to be willing to be that hero traversing the path and allowing us to see those rises and falls in your humanity, your messy humanness, and also in your rise. It's important. So thank you for your humility. I'm just so grateful that you chose to write it. You chose to relive it on the pages so that it could be of service to others.
I accept and receive the kind words, and thank you for shining light on that piece, because you're right. It's as I said in the beginning, I think the real magic of writing a book is being committed to the process and continuing it, and not giving up on it. Because I'll tell you, I almost gave up at the very 11th hour when you and I were done writing it, and I was denied by a publishing house because of my religion, and I felt like I was just so deflated, and I just felt like nobody wants this. No agents wanted it. No publishing houses wanted it, because that's not the course it was meant to take. And one guy took a shot, and it was a hybrid self-published, but I have all the rights. But he guided through the process, and of course that was the way it was supposed to be. I wouldn't have it any other way, but it was rough. So I'm grateful and appreciate you honoring that, Russell, because I know you were with me in the depths of a lot of that through the writing process. And there's a hero's journey story just in the writing of Unhooked, not even about the addiction and recovery, but just from the inception. True. Yeah. So as we wrap up, how can my friends access your resources, and maybe share a little bit more if they want to get real serious and hire you one-on-one like I did, which I'm so grateful I took that route. Yeah, share a little bit about that.
So with the plunge.
Yeah. I was like, I skipped all the steps. I was like, I just want to work with you one-on-one. Let's do it.
Yep. And your commitment made it happen. It was glorious. Well, I would love to share that I have some free resources and some really deep, delicious resources that are available online. If you go to yourinspiredstory.com, here we have inspired holidays, but I just love to see that there's all different kinds of resources and some things about my books. The easiest thing is to go into the VIP login and scroll down, and you'll see that we have all of these amazing programs. So it's wonderful for those beginning. We have Author Unleashed, Crushing Your Fear, because so many people get really scared about, do I have something worth reading? Is it even worth the effort? And then Author Unleashed Going Pro is for those of you that are like, dang, I know I have a story. I just don't know how to get it out onto the page. And I want to make sure that there's a return on my investment. And so it's got some good information about publishing. As Jason mentioned, that's another one of those hurdles, and things to be able to navigate in these waters. But it's possible and is more possible now than any other time in human history. And then Write Juicy is something that I highly recommend. I was telling you how important it is for every writer to develop a timeline. This tells you why: left brain, right brain, master brain, how to bring it together and how to put everything into a template that all of a sudden you witness to yourself just the glory and these steps on your hero's journey. And of course, I have a hero's journey piece to writing epic nonfiction.
A shero's journey is what it should be.
It is both. It is both. And then I would just love to invite any of you to that are really serious to come to our Inspired Writers Retreat. And so we just invite you to come and spend time with us. We always have small groups. You know, I've spoken on stages up to 20,000 people, but I love to spend time with you and your story. I think storytelling on this level, on this deep, vulnerable, let's get it done level is where I really love to play. And so we have at maximum 18 authors at a retreat. And you get to have one-on-one time with me. We have delicious food. You don't have to do the dishes. You get well taken care of. And we just go into intensive instruction, experiential writing exercises. And it's been called Life and Book Transforming. So we absolutely love it. And it's my give back. Because when my second book came out on Oprah and Dr. Phil and all these things, I had more than 200 people come to me and said, will you write this book? Will you help me write it, or will you write this? And I didn't have resources to send them to. And then, Jason, I don't know if you know this, but I had a woman that came, like she drove from California to Utah. She said, you're my author. I just know you're my author. And she proceeds to tell me this crazy story of, you know, she was born to serve her parents. She never got married, never had any kids. And all of a sudden they both died. And she comes to find out that they're not the upstanding citizens that she'd been led to believe, that her mom, as an RN, had been dealing in black market babies. And she was one of them and had been bought for the price of a washing machine. And I was so astounded. And I interviewed her, and then I talked with her, and I recognized what her beautiful rise was. She had a son, you know, she'd fallen in love. She started to live for herself. But because of all the years of abuse and things, she contracted cancer and she passed before we could write her full story. And I made a promise that would never happen again. I cannot be everyone's author or co-author or mentor, but I created that Inspired Writers Retreat so that you do not leave with your story unsung. It is meant to cut years, decades off your learning curve. We get deep into the heart of your story. And on the other side of that retreat, we break through the three biggest hurdles that keep most people from writing, completing, and publishing and launching themselves. And it is extraordinary. And it's one of those things like you, Jason, you're like, this has an energy and a life of its own. And I can't even take credit for all of it. That's the thing. I chose to be the vessel, but I will tell you, it is a beautiful, transforming experience. So I would, anyone that wants to write their book, I would love to invite you to come.
Oh, thank you for sharing that particular story. And thank you for creating the retreat. And I can say too, I have been invited to be a guest at one of Bridget's retreats, and they go all out. And just the accommodations and the comfort, and it's so relaxed. Like they're in their cozy socks and warm blankets, and there's those pockets of time where it's just quiet time and people are just thinking and writing and seeking guidance and meditation. And I just think that it's a really beautiful service that you have provided to so many. And I love you. And I'm grateful for you. And if I can ever be of service to you, just let me know. But any final thoughts or words before we end?
Just, I will share with you, we love to invite great keynote speakers. And we have had Jason as one of our keynote speakers. We love to have a Friday night dinner, and we invite other authors who have been in earlier retreats to come as well. COVID kind of circumvented some of that for a bit, but we're opening that back up. We got to have William Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, and he came and he just hung out with the authors, and they were just like, oh, okay, this is Paul and this is what he's doing. And, but they didn't recognize that he's the big keynote that was going to be on Friday night. And he just hung out with everyone. And he got to do some experiential exercises with us when I was facilitating. And that was glorious. It was like he became a child again. And he was so on fire and so excited. And then he was our keynote. And all of a sudden you see these people who are like, oh, this is him. He wrote The Shack. He did that movie. And then to recognize we're all the same. There is no one above or below. Those are constructs of the human mind. And one thing about the retreats and one thing about becoming an author and a leader like Jason is to recognize, you learn how to harness your superpowers, your secret sauce, your mad skills, and you're still human. And to be able to play on the level of other humans and never hold yourself above nor ever below, like Kevin Hall speaks of in Genshai, to treat no one small, not even yourself. I think when you write to this degree, you begin to hold yourself at this beautiful place, and you also begin to see others in that same glorious, sacred, beautiful place where I hold my friend Jason. And Jason, I just want to thank you for choosing to be that soul, the one who comes to the table with all of your gifts and glory and all of the hard stuff. And just like you do in your recovery process and just like you do with families, just you're approachable and you are lovable, but you are strong. And for people to be able to see what's possible for their own lives on the other side, you're living proof of recovery. You're living proof of humility and accountability and leadership. And you're living proof that stories can change the world. So thank you for sharing yours today and always. I just love and appreciate you.
Bridget, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I accept and receive your kind words with immense gratitude. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And I love you. And those of you guys that are wondering if you should check out, I sent one of my friends, Megan Howard, to Bridget, and she ended up going to one of the retreats, and I get this text in all caps. I love Bridget. Love her. Thank you again. And then I responded and she said, yes, seriously, one of the most warm, gentle souls I have ever met. And I think she was just on fire. And I've sent a couple of other of my friends, Rob Eastman. There are others, and every single one of them to a person, Clint Pulver, every single one of them has just said how much you've impacted them and how you've just been that link to point them to the next level. And I know you can't take everybody to the finish line, but boy, do you provide the team and the mechanism and the vehicle for all of that to come together along the way. So thank you. And tell your husband and your clients, thanks for taking a little more time than we had scheduled today. But God, this was juicy, wasn't it? To use your word.
Absolutely juicy. Gotta love it.
Thanks.